Welcome to Hometown Salutes. I'm Sherry Kendall. Today I have a very special guest. Most of you will know Grady from the sports because he wrote a lot of articles about our kids, but not many of you know that Grady was in the service. So welcome, Grady, to our show.
Thank you very much.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, like what branch of service were you in, and did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was in the United States Navy, and it almost by accident that I went into the Navy, and I'll explain. I wanted to go into the Air Force because as a senior in high school, I didn't want to go to college because I didn't have money to go to college, and I didn't want to take out a lot of school loans. So I knew that I wasn't ready for what I wanted to do yet, so I really didn't have an idea what I wanted to do, so I decided I wanted to go in the Air Force. And so we had careers day at school, and we had an Air Force recruiter who was coming to the school, and there were 3 periods that you could go and talk to someone and get some ideas about what you wanted, a career. And so I signed up for Air Force, Air Force, Air Force, because I wanted to get as much information as possible. So I wanted to spend all 3 periods with the Air Force recruiter, and wouldn't you know it, he didn't show up. So I went to my teacher and I said, look, I've signed up for Air Force for all 3 of these periods and he's not here. What do I do? And he said, well, there's a Navy recruiter here. Maybe you could talk to him. It's military, so it's kind of the same thing, and you can find out some things from him. And I'm here to tell you that if you can't look a recruiter straight in the eye and tell him no when he wants to recruit you, he's going to get you. So the next thing I knew, I was singing Anchors Away for the Navy, and that's how I ended up in the Navy.
And so what years were you in?
I graduated in '82. I went into the Navy in November of '82. Great Lakes, Illinois, the coldest time of year. It was brutal.
Wow.
It was brutal. So yeah.
Okay. So did you come from a military family?
My dad was in the Army, but he never talked much about it. Never spoke about it hardly at all. The only thing I really knew is that he was in the Army, and when they had the Bay of Pigs incident down in Cuba, he was one of the ones that was getting ready to possibly ship over, and then the whole thing resolved itself and he didn't have to. That's really all I knew about it. And he was a truck driver in the Army. That's all I knew. So I would have to say my dad was in the Army, but I really didn't come from a military family because we didn't talk about it much.
So how were they about you signing up, going into the Navy?
They didn't have a problem with that at all. I mean, I had some sort of direction at that point. My alternative would have been get out of high school and not really know what I wanted to do, because I didn't want to go into college and run up a huge college debt. So they were glad that I had some sense of direction.
Okay. Anyway. So you did basic training, you said, in
Great Lakes. Yep.
Okay. And how long were you there?
It was 8 weeks when we went to Great Lakes, and then after that, I was shipped to Lakehurst, New Jersey, for my A school. They call it an A school, and that's where you actually get the training for the job that you're going to do when you go out to your ship, or if you stay land duty, then it prepares you for your actual job that you're going to do. Basic training is more vague and stuff like that. Learning about military tradition and learning things like that. This actually focuses more on your job. Lakehurst, New Jersey, some people might recognize that. It's where the Hindenburg exploded.
Oh.
It's where the Hindenburg blew up, and rumor was they had the burned hull or whatever of the Hindenburg somewhere on that base, but you couldn't go anywhere near it. That was the rumor. We don't know if that was true or not.
Okay. So did you think basic training was hard? What was a typical day like?
Basic training.
I mean, you're 18 years old, right? Probably.
Yeah, about 18. Yeah, just 18, not quite 19 yet. They would come in the morning, and the one thing I remember is that the company commander would come into the room. He'd turn on the lights. Sometimes he'd kick a trash can down the aisle. Sometimes he wouldn't. But he always said, "Winky, winky, rise and shine. Another day is yours." And is still mine. So yeah, he would say that every morning when he came in to get us up. And boot camp for me, I don't think I really took it seriously, as seriously as I should have. There were times when I did things that you just don't do in boot camp, and I would never do them now. But as an 18-year-old kid, I didn't really. We were doing bunk drills one time, and you have to put 45-degree angles in your sheets. And I was having problems with one of my 45-degree angles. And when I finally got it done, I was running out of time because it's a timed thing. You have a certain amount of time to do it. And as I went to go around the bed to get to the other side, one of the company commanders was in my way. And I put my hands on his chest and shoved him out of the way so I could get around quicker. I didn't even think about it. I just put my hand on his chest and shoved him. He could not believe that I put my hands on him. And I ended up doing push-ups through the rest of the bunk drills for the rest of it. So that's what I mean by not taking it seriously. I made a mistake putting my name in a book one time, and I walked up and I was so angry I just tossed the book on the desk and it slid and hit the company commander in the chest. I mean, just things like that, little things like that just really told me that I'm not taking this serious enough. I'm not seeing these guys for who they are. So.
But you survived.
I made it.
That's all.
Got on the bus and a Journey song was playing on the bus, and I just realized that this whole, it was the song Separate Ways by Journey, which I thought was very, very ironic because here we are getting on this bus and we're all going separate ways. We're all going different places.
That's hysterical.
And so first thing, Journey's playing Separate Ways, and I thought, this was just a big head game. It was just, they just wanted to get in your head for 8 weeks, and so, yeah.
So then you said they bussed you to?
Lakehurst. Well, they bused me to the airport, and then I flew to Lakehurst, New Jersey. And then I did my A school. Oh, you're going to ask me how long that was. Oh, I don't quite remember how long it was. But you learn your the job that you're going to do. And then what they did at the end of our school. Now, my job is aircraft carriers. It had to be an aircraft carrier because what I learned was a rate called ABE, which is an Aviation Bosun's Mate Equipment. That's what it stands for. And if you've ever watched Top Gun, you'll see a guy in a green shirt and a green helmet that runs out from underneath the plane right before it shoots off the catapult. That's what I did. That's what I did. It wasn't me in that movie, but that's what I did. So because you're dealing with the aircraft and going off catapults and learning catapults, the other thing we learned was arresting gear, and that's the wires on the back of the ship that actually catch the planes when they land. Planes have a tail hook, and the tail hook actually catches one of those wires and stops the plane. So those were the two things that I learned in A school, arresting gear and catapults. So it had to be an aircraft carrier or shore duty. And what they did was we had, say, 30 kids in the class. I'm not exactly sure. We had 30 kids in the class, and at the end of the course, when it was about time for us to leave, they just asked for 30 sets of orders. The teachers, the instructors did. And then whoever had the highest grade point average in the class, whoever had the highest grade, got to choose first. And then the second highest got to choose second, all the way down to the guy who had the lowest grade, and he was stuck with whatever was left. So so
you're not going to tell me you were the lowest, right?
No, I was somewhere in the middle. I was somewhere in the middle.
All right, let's get that straight.
The night, and they told us what the orders were. There's 3 orders to the USS America, 3 orders to the Independence, 5 orders to the John F. Kennedy. The Saratoga was in there. What other? I don't think the Forrestal was there. But they were naming off these carriers and how many sets of orders they had for each one. So we knew the night before how many sets of orders or what was available. And we knew where we ranked in the class. So we got together as a class and we hashed it all out, where we were going to go. Money changed hands, promises were made, deals were struck. I mean, we hashed it all out. And at the end of the night, there was only one shore duty order, Mayport, Florida. All the rest of them were aircraft carriers. And so we had it all ironed out that the kid who had the highest grade in the class he was going to take Mayport, Florida. The kid with the highest average, he was going to take Mayport, Florida. And so we get to class, and remember, money's changed hands. I mean, it's a whole process, like 3-4 hour process. And finally, we get there in class, and they call out his name, and he gets up and he chooses the Coral C.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and we're all sitting there going, wait a minute, no. You were taking me Port Florida. So then the kid who had the Coral C had to take something else, and that bumped that kid and bumped that kid. So I was originally supposed to go to the USS America, and I ended up on the USS Independence.
Okay.
So because of the way it all worked out, there was no America billets left when it came my turn. So just the way it was.
So how did your buddies go with you? Like, were there three slots for that?
I had one person went with me. One. I think one went with me.
Okay.
And then just one. I think it was just one person. Carol Dearborn was his name, and he went with me. He's the only one.
Okay. All right. So so you went there, and how long do you stay on the air?
Well, now originally that was going to be my ship for my entire enlistment. It was going to be my ship, but about 2 years in, and I don't know exact dates, but about 2 years in, the USS Independence was slated to be completely refurbished from top to bottom. All right, they called it SLEP. Okay, Service Life Extension Program. It was going into SLEP. And since it's going into SLEP, it was going to be in a shipyard somewhere being taken apart and put back together, pretty much. So they really didn't need me to be on the ship because we weren't going to be shooting off any airplanes and catching the air. We weren't going to be doing any of that. So a lot of us ended up getting getting sent to another ship. And I ended up going to the USS John F. Kennedy.
Oh,
and that
wow.
was CV-67. And CV-67 is a whole number. They give them whole numbers. The Independence was CV-62.
Okay.
So I ended up going with the John F. Kennedy, who was our sister ship when I was on the Independence. Kennedy was our sister ship, so I ended up going to her.
Okay.
And so then I spent the rest of my career on the Kennedy.
So you stayed on the ship, right?
Oh yeah. You live on the ship. Now if you get married, I mean, obviously there's some people who can live on base, get an apartment, you can live off. But if you don't, then you live on the ship. I stayed on the ship the entire 4 years, both ships.
So what's life like on a ship?
It's like a city. It's kind of cliche, but it's a floating city. There's 5,000 guys, and now there's girls on them too. That's something I can't even fathom because that wasn't the case when I was on. But it's 5,000 people on board when you're out to sea. Because before you're out, when you're important stuff, the squadrons aren't with you. The planes, all the pilots, all the planes, all the mechanics for the planes, everyone that's involved with the squadrons, they fly on after you go out to sea. And then you're at 5,000. Well, actually, we take the people out with us, but when we're not out to sea, it's not near that many. But it's bunk beds you sleep in. Your clothes are actually under the mattress you live in. You lift up the thing, and all your clothes are in here. And you learn real quickly why they taught you to fold things a certain way in boot camp. You catch on real quick. That's the only way I can fit everything in here is if I fold it exactly the way they told me in boot camp. So you learn to do that, fold things a certain way. I still fold. My wife, she cracks up because I still fold things that way, and it's crazy. So, yeah.
That's funny. So, did you get Liberty? And if so, like, what did you do?
Did get Liberty. We're overseas. It was different when I was in. When I was in, everything's different. But when I was in, you do an 8-month cruise, 6 to 8 month cruise, and you might get 25 days of Liberty the entire 8 months. And that's combined, like 3 days here, 2 days there, 4 days over there. And I'll tell you some of the places we went to. But that was the way it was. We mostly were just floating around the Mediterranean, mostly. Shooting planes, getting pilots qualified, getting them trained, doing training ourselves. and then you'd hit a port for 3 or 4 days, and then you'd be right back at it. Now, my last cruise that I was on, and I ended up getting flown off in the middle of that cruise because it was time for me to get out. But on that cruise, the ship went over to the Mediterranean, and it went from port to port to port to port to port. That's what it did. It just went from one port to the other, and it saved money on fuel, because obviously aircraft carriers use a lot of fuel when they're underway. But they just went from port to port and did all their training while they were going from one port to the next. They did all their flying and stuff. So that was big. That was hugely different than when I was doing full cruises. I don't know what they're doing now. I don't know if they're back to haze, gray, and underway the whole time, and we'll hit just a couple of ports during this cruise, or if we're just going to go from one port to the next. I don't know what they're doing now, but that was a major change when I got out. And I said, yeah, you're going to do this now? Now that I'm getting out, you're going to do it now? Because this would have been great, 2 years ago.
Exactly.
My rate as an ABE, the green shirts, pilots have to get day qualifications and night qualifications. They have to get them both. And so what that meant for me shooting planes is that we would work 16-hour days every day for months on end, because there's 4 catapults. There's 2 on the front of the ship, which is called the bow, and then there's 2 on the waist, which is kind of the side. There are 4 catapults, and I always said, why can't we put a 5th cat crew on this ship, on each ship, and rotate it and give a cat crew a day off here and a day off there, maybe every 5th day off. But that's not the way it is. You have 4 cat crews, you have 4 catapults, so you're working every day. I didn't mind that so much. I mean, I loved what I did. When you go underneath a plane on a catapult and it's in full power, that plane's in full power, it is one of the neatest experiences in the world to be in that situation. And the thing about being under those planes is there's a certain way that you have to run out from underneath a plane, because when it's in full power, there are intakes on the aircraft, and if you run anywhere near an intake, it will suck you into the intake, and you'll go through the engine, and there's nothing left of you. There's nothing left. I won't get too graphic, but it did happen once while I was in the military. It happened one time.
Not to you, though.
Not to me, thank God. But so there's a certain way you have to run out from underneath a plane. If you're underneath an F-14 Tomcat, the intakes are right here on the sides. So you have to run, when you're ready to leave, you have to run forward and then out to avoid the intakes, right? But on an A7 Corsair, the intake is right underneath the nose. And so if you're confused as to where you are, if you think you're under an F-14 and you run forward, you're going to run right into the intake.
Geez.
So there's a certain way you have to run out from each plane to avoid those intakes. And if you ever watched me when I was underneath an aircraft, every time, you would see my lips moving. And what is he doing? And I'm always looking at the plane where I'm at, and I'm saying straight out or forward and out. I look at the plane, okay, this is a Tomcat, forward and out. I would just say that to myself, and I got in the habit of doing that, so my brain would be locked into which way I was going, and I'd never make a mistake. So, yeah.
And you only had so much time, really.
Yeah, and you do. Well, when it's in full power, basically, I'm the safety guy. I'm in there checking sure that everything's right here. Everything's right here. No one's where they shouldn't be. And then I would run out with my thumb up, and then the flight officer would do this, and he'd touch the deck and do that, and we'd launch the plane. So.
Did you have any close encounters?
I think the only time I had something good that went wrong with me is right behind the plane. They have these. They're called jet blast deflectors, and it's a panels that come up, and the plane's in front of it, and what it does, it literally deflects the jet blast, so you don't blow people off the ship down there. And the well came, or the panels came up one time, and I thought I saw something in there that shouldn't have been in there, like some foreign object or something in there. So I went to look, and that's about the time that they put the plane in full tension, and it was a Tomcat. And if you ever seen a Tomcat take off, they have actual fire comes out the back of them. And I thought I was going to be cooked alive. It was so hot back there. But they find I just remember tucking up as much skin as possible. I'm like launch it, get it out of here. So yeah, it was that was the only time I really had a close encounter, I think.
All right. So then you got out of the Navy, and what did you do after your service?
I got out of the Navy, and I worked a bunch of jobs. I worked for a cabinet company. I worked for what else? Oh, I worked for a clothing company, a garment factory. I worked for I did 5 years as a bookkeeper for a pallet company. I mean, I was just kind of spinning my wheels a little bit, and then walked into the newspaper was running an ad for. I wanted to go back a little bit. One of the things I did do when I was in the military, and I wish I would have stuck to it. I wanted to go in as a journalist in the Navy. But somebody told me that, no, you don't want to do journalism. You'll never go up in rate. There's so many journalists in the Navy. There's too many, and they only let so many people advance in rate. And there's too many, you'll never advance. You'll be an E1 or an E2 or an E3. You'll never make it to E4. Well, I wish I would have done that, because this is what I want to be. This is what I want to do. I should have done it in the military. But I did. We would go overseas, and the ship would organize like a soccer team. And then as part of a goodwill thing, we would play, like one time we played the Italian national team. Our ship got some guys, and they went and played against the Italian national team for an exhibition. And so I went with the team, and I covered that just like a sporting event, and I came back and I wrote it for the ship's newspaper. So I did some of what I'm doing now when I was in the Navy. So I knew I always wanted to do that. I knew I did. And then one day, going forward now, one day they ran an ad in the newspaper that they wanted a sports editor. And the only official training I'd ever had was what I had done on the ship. And so I just walked in off the street, and I said, I see you're looking for a sports editor. I'm here to tell you I'm not that guy, but I would love to write sports for you guys. And so they put me on as a stringer, what's called a stringer. And basically they pick certain games in the week, and they send you cover the game, you write the game, and that's it. That's all it is. You're almost like a contractor. You're like a private contractor. So I did that for about 3 years. And the whole time that I was doing that, I was watching how things were done, how paper was laid out, how, all the things that a sports editor would have to know. I kept my eye open, and I learned. So when the sports editor's position came open again 3 years later, I asked him, I said, just throw my hat in the ring for that. Go ahead, let's try it. And then 2 weeks later, I got the call and became sports editor back in Kansas. And it's been sports ever since.
So how'd you end up in Fayette County?
I met my wife, who lives in Liberty. She lives in Liberty, and I met her online. And we chatted for probably a year online. And then she came out to Kansas, and we dated for about 5 months in Kansas. And then I asked her to marry me. It's kind of backwards. I asked her to marry me before I met her parents. That's backwards. But we got married, and then I came to Indiana. I met her parents and fell in love with them. Fell in love with her whole family, and just said, I'm going to move to Indiana one day. And so we did. We moved to Indiana, and I don't regret it. I love it here.
And so you went to school where?
Chanute, Kansas.
Oh, so you were in Kansas.
Yep, Chanute, Kansas. Graduated from Chanute, Kansas in 1982, yep. And that's where I was editor for the first time. It was in Chanute. And then I did that for a couple years. And then we went to radio my wife and I went to radio. We had our own morning show.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had our own radio show. It was the TNT morning show. And it was great because one thing you learn is that when you work with your husband or your wife, you can treat them a lot different than you can a normal person. You can get away with a lot more. And so we had a great time doing that. And then they changed the format. They decided to change the format, go with something else. And so we said, okay, well, we're gonna go to Indiana now. This is a good time to go to Indiana. So we went to Indiana.
That's awesome. So are you glad you joined the service? Was that a good move for you?
It was, because like I said, I wasn't ready for life yet out of high school. I didn't know what I knew that I always wanted to be a writer. I knew that I did. I knew that I wanted to be a writer since I was 10 years old. I've wanted to write sports, but I didn't want to go to school and run up the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in school debt. So I didn't know how I was going to get in the door of writing sports. So I wasn't ready. So I was glad I did. I really appreciate when someone tells me, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you did for our country and all this stuff. And it's great, but I didn't do it. I mean, I hate to say this, but I didn't do it for the country. I didn't really think about, well, I'm going to go defend my country, and that's not how it worked for me. I mean, it ended up. I mean, I was off the coast of Grenada during the war, the Grenada War. I was there for that. So a quick story on that. I was part of whenever we had battle stations. My battle station was a battle dress station. I was trained to treat 5 wounds. So when they would call, for us to go to battle stations, that's where I went. And while we were off the coast of Grenada, they called battle stations, and I went there. And this was not a drill. This was the real deal. The Guam was the hospital ship off the coast of Grenada, and it was overran, I guess. So we were the overflow, and so they brought some wounded to our ship. And a corpsman walked up to me and he pointed over my shoulder behind me. He says, I need you to go over and I need you to stay with that young man until I can get somebody to him. Can you do that? Well, I didn't look. And I said, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. No problem. And so then I turned around and there was this Marine whose leg was gone. His left leg was gone below the knee. And I'm like 19, 20 years old. What am I going to say to this guy? I wasn't prepared for that at all. Mm-mm. So I just went and held his hand and, talked to him and told him, everything's going to be fine. You're going to be great. And so that was my one experience with war, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So did you keep in contact with any of your buddies?
I am in contact with a few of them through Facebook and stuff. Not as much as, none of us talk as much as we should. But yeah, we keep in touch as much as we can. So
that's great. That's great. Well, Grady, I appreciate you coming and sharing with us your experience as a veteran. I want to thank you for your service and your sacrifice. I mean, you would.
I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it, but yeah.
But you're fun to have on. But your real talent is your TikTok videos.
That's what being laid off for 5 months will do for you during COVID.
Well, I appreciate everything you do in Fayette County. I mean, you have a big job that you've been doing with the newspaper. So
no, I appreciate it. I love it here. I'll do this till I die if they'll let me. If they'll let me.
Well, you're awesome.
That's easier.
Be sure to tune in next month for another show of Hometown Salutes.